Today I'm going to show you guys a dead simple way to acetone smooth your 3D prints to make them a little less 3D printed. Alright guys, so if you know anything about 3D printing, you have probably heard of this thing called acetone smoothing. It's really big all over YouTube and the internet in general. It's basically the process of taking a 3D print, surrounding it with acetone vapor, sometimes heated, sometimes cold. We'll talk about that in a minute though. And it essentially melts the outer layer of your print to give it a smooth finish. Now this only works to my knowledge on ABS plastic. Over the years, people have come up with many different ways to do this, and all of them are generally, in my opinion, overly complicated. People have come up with ideas from taking long glass tubes and submerging them underwater to cooking your prints in a rice cooker. So today I'm going to show you a process that's much simpler, easier, and just works a whole lot better in my opinion. Now I did not come up with this system. While I have made a few changes to it, the core idea was not really mine. There's a couple other people I've seen that are doing it, but I had to search the internet long and hard to find out about this, and I really think it deserves more time under the sun for being such an amazing process. Before I talk about what the process is, let me talk a little bit about when you should and maybe shouldn't acetone smooth your 3D prints. A lot of people just think, oh, if it's ABS, I should obviously smooth it because smoothing is always better for 3D printing. Not necessarily. A lot of the times, people enjoy that smooth finish on models because it really makes them look less 3D printed and more like an end-user product. But there are some drawbacks. By nature, your print will lose detail if you acetone smooth it. It will no longer have crisp edges, but more rounded corners, which obviously a lot of people like, but if you're going for extreme dimensional accuracy, you do not want to acetone smooth your 3D prints. It will throw everything out of calibration. This is an example of one of my favorite acetone smooth 3D prints I've done so far. It is quite smooth, but if you take some calipers to it, you'll find out it is not the original dimensions. It is slightly smaller because some of it, the acetone is smoothed over, and it's just a bit different now that we've smoothed it. And while it does look really good on this model, I personally would not enjoy the effects on a model like this. This is a low poly Pokemon called... what is the name? Why do they make Pokemon names so complicated? But the cool thing about this model is the crisp edges around it. That's the sort of the low poly feel. And that's why I don't really like to smooth a whole lot of low poly prints, just because the cool thing about low poly is that it is crisp and flat and sharp. So you might not want to do it to low poly, but then again, it all is really just a matter of preference. Now this is a model that looks really good on acetone smoothing. Yeah, that's a Stormtrooper head on an angel. It's sort of like a Christmas joke. You know what, let me not talk about that one. But assuming you found a good model that you think would look good with acetone smoothing, let's go ahead and talk about the things you're going to need to acetone smooth your prints. For this process, you're going to need 3 specific things. Well, 4 if you include the acetone, but I mean, including the acetone would be like including the 3D printer, so you know. First, some sort of container. Any basic Rubbermaid container should work. This is actually brand name Rubbermaid. Now, Rubbermaid containers don't include materials, to my knowledge, that are affected by acetone, but some containers that are not Rubbermaid do include acetone. I actually just ruined one the other day because I didn't know it had acetone in it. So make sure you use containers that you don't care about. Any old container should do. Clear is preferred, so you can actually see your print while it's smoothing. We'll talk more about that later. But yeah, anything will really work as long as your model fits in it and it's not too cramped. You want a good amount of space, but obviously you wouldn't want too huge, otherwise the process is going to take much longer. You're also going to need paper towels and a small piece of tinfoil. And, that's it. Pretty much any type of 100% acetone should work for this project. This stuff is super cheap, you can pick it up at Walmart. And of course you're going to want gloves because it would be hard to show off your awesome smooth 3D prints with fleshy nubs for a hand. Alright, so first off, you're going to want to obviously remove the lid of your container and take a piece of paper towel and lay it down in your container. Now, the size of the paper towel will change, of course, depending on the size of your particular container, but you pretty much want all the walls to be covered in paper towel as well as the floor. Well, not exactly all the walls. I like to keep one open so I can actually see my model, because what's the point of a clear container if it's covered in paper towels? I tore off a smaller piece for the last piece on my container simply because I don't want to have too much paper towel in there, so that looks pretty good. It's alright if it drapes a bit over the edge of the container. That shouldn't be a problem. Once that's done, you just take your piece of tinfoil and put it in at the bottom of your container. The piece of tinfoil only has to be as large as your model, because the goal of this is to make sure your model doesn't touch any of the acetone straight off. You just want the vapors to be touching the model. Actually, we don't want that in there yet. Or this, come to think of it. Next, what you want to do is take your acetone and pour it into your container just enough to soak all the paper towels in acetone. You want them to be pretty much soaked so that they're all, you know, visibly wet. Might have to rotate it around and pour it in a couple different places. I am usually a bit overzealous with how much I put in here. Once that's done, go ahead and put in the piece of tinfoil in there, and then lay your print down and go ahead and put on the lid, preferably somewhat quickly before the acetone has a chance to start evaporating into the air. Speaking of evaporating, be sure to do this in a well-ventilated area because the fumes of acetone can be bad to breathe in. So as you can see here, our print is inside there, and I've left this side open so you can sort of see the print inside there so we can watch to see when to take it out. And that is pretty much it. As far as how long to leave it in the container, that's really up to your preference depending on how long you want it smooth. Keep in mind that once you take it out, it will continue to smooth for a bit longer even once it's out of the container. So you don't want to take it out at the point of what you want it to be. You want to take it out a bit before that, and then when it's out of the container, it will continue to smooth and then dry out. With that particular container and the amount of acetone that I put in, 2 hours usually about does it, then about 1 hour out of the container to let it continue smoothing and eventually dry out. But you will, of course, have to experiment with your particular setup. I'm going to wait 2 hours and come back, and I'll go ahead and show you the extraction process. Man, I made that sound cool. The extraction process. Hey! Yo, maybe that was a little creepy. Okay, so it has been about 2 hours, and we're ready to go ahead and take it out of the container. Let's do it. So let's go ahead and open this up and see how it looks. I'm going to go ahead and lift the tin foil out, being careful not to touch the actual model. And there we go, looking pretty good. Now that isn't exactly to the smoothing level that I would prefer, but remember, it's going to continue to smooth once it's out of the container. So now I'm going to leave this out for about another hour just to dry out and continue the smoothing process. Alright, well it's been about an hour after taking it out of the tin, and look how smooth that thing has become. That is one smooth 3D print. Let me take it over here to the light so you can really see. As you can see, this thing is really quite smooth. The acetone really helped it. Those nice glistening surfaces sure do look good. This thing really does look injection molded. So as you can see, this thing turned out pretty well. I'm really happy with the results, and I think this method is, at least in my opinion, the best acetone smoothing method, or really just the simplest, you know. It just works pretty well. I've never had something fail with this method, and I've never had it not work. So, you know, there's many methods out there. If this works for you, great. If it doesn't, why are you still watching this video? As you can see between these two pictures on screen now, there's a big difference between when you first take it out and when it's set out for quite a long time. It actually does continue to smooth after sitting out, so to keep that in mind as far as when you want to take it in and out. I could have probably left this in a bit longer, but you know, actually over the next 24 hours it will get technically slightly smoother, but this is pretty much what it's gonna look like. I did notice in the recording I put a bit less acetone than I usually do. I usually put in a lot of acetone. I didn't put in that much at that time. So, you know, it's really just personal preference. You have to figure out that balance between how long to leave it in, how much acetone to put in. It really just depends on your particular setup. Also, small note, after these have been acetone smooth, even if they're dry to the touch, they are still somewhat pliable. I could probably bend the thinner parts of a model. This doesn't really have any thin parts, so I probably couldn't bend it. But with this octopus model, I could actually bend the feet after it was acetone smooth. It took about 12 hours for it to get fully hardened, but after 12 hours, that should be plenty. You know, leave it overnight, and it will be back to its super hard ABS hardness that we all know and love. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that little tutorial. Hope it was helpful to you in learning a better way than you might have seen before to acetone smooth 3D print. So I'm Josiah. Thanks for watching. Dang, I can't do that. I already cracked it.